Okay, that was an extra long 5 minutes, but we'll be back in session here, and we will start with the consent calendar. The following consent calendar items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They may be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested person may request an item be removed from the consent calendar for discussion and consideration. Supervisor Haas.
Yes, I'll be recusing from C2 because I was not present at that meeting.
Thank you.
That's the minutes of June 26th board meeting.
Thank you. I don't have any other advance requests to move any items from the consent calendar.
Move approval of the consent calendar as distributed to the board and the public.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The Shasta County Board of Supervisors will recess and convene as the Shasta County Water Agency. The Shasta County Board of Supervisors does not receive any additional compensation or stipend for acting as the Shasta County Water Agency. The first item is receive an update on the Shasta-Tehama County Water Master District on their efforts to assume the duties and to consider providing direction to staff as appropriate. Mr. Minturn.
Morning, Chairman Modi, members of the board, Pat Minturn, Public Works Director. Before you today is a water master item. As the board's aware, water rights in California are established by state law and statutes, but sometimes folks can't agree along a given water course about exactly how those laws should be applied, and so then it goes to the courts. And so somebody finally takes the matter to court, and the court will look at all the water rights on a given tributary, and they'll issue what's called a decree. And sometimes when a situation is very controversial, as water rights sometimes are, they'll go a step farther and they will designate a water master to see to it that their decree is carried out in the field day by day to actually monitor diversions. Historically, that's been the job of the Department of Water Resources. Most of these decrees were from back in the 1920s, and back then DWR, a state agency, they had the staff, they had the expertise, and they were impartial. Since the 1920s, a lot's happened with that. State government no longer has the money to subsidize this sort of an operation. Staff expenses have become, it's no longer the bargain it once was, having government employees. And also the state has come to operate the State Water Project, and so they're a competitor for those water rights. And so there's uneasiness out there with how the water master has been doing their business. In 2008, the Farm Bureau and Senator Onnested got together and they passed some legislation that created the Shasta-Tehama County Water Master District. And similar districts have been formed in other counties nearby, Siskiyou, Lassen, Modoc. And these water master districts, however, didn't have any funding stream. It was created, but it was an empty shell. The only thing that was established was that the Board of Supervisors would appoint an initial governing body, and that governing body would then flesh out the entire concept, and after that, the representatives would be elected. And so the Board of Supervisors did so back in 2008, and that governing body has since been studying the matter, figuring out how they could assume these duties of the water master. And so they're here before you today with a presentation and a discussion and a potential request. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Shannon Wooten, who is the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Minturn. Welcome, Mr. Wooten.
Chairman of the board, members, thank you very much for the ability to appear before you on behalf of the Shasta-Tehama Water Master District. All right, very good. I'd like to introduce our board of directors, some of which are here today. I'm Shannon Wooten, and I've been the chairman since we started, and I represent North Cow Creek. Abe Hathaway represents Burning Creek, and he was on the board of supervisors years ago. Mark Bidwell represents Hat Creek. Gil Spencer represents North Fork of Cottonwood Creek, and our Digger Creek representative resigned several years ago, and he travels a lot, and so that he felt that he couldn't be a good representative, and so they are in the process of replacing their representative. Bill Gibson and Paul Stout, both are members at large. They've been very influential and very helpful in trying to get us to where we are today, so and I really appreciate them. A little background, when we started originally back in either '05 or '06, there was a few water users that met with the DWR in MacArthur, wondering why the fees for water mastering keep raising every year. And so there was quite a bit of dialogue, a little bit different attitude in those days on the DWR's part. One of the things that really woke us up was, and I quote, they said, "Sky is the limit, we can charge you anything we want to." And that warm and cozy feeling got us to where we are today. So in whatever year it was, Senate Bill 516, already pre-mentioned, created our Shasta-Tama Water Master District, and then the Board of Directors created a special district for us. This came with no funding. Since then, all of our monthly meetings, all of our mailings, all of our individual meetings with our decree people have been funded by the directors out of our own pocket. Now, in order to get started, we needed 15% of the water users to sign an agreement for substitution. We got that plus. North Fork of Cottonwood Creek has opted to join at a later date if they can. They are made up mainly of absentee owners, and so that sheds a little different light on that. Digger Creek, obviously, without a representative, they may join us a little bit later too. Hat Creek, Burn Creek, and North Cow Creek are in the position now we wish to go forward. A little bit of more, did I go forward or backward? No, here we go. Okay. Jumping ahead of myself. We're trying to keep my brain straight. Prior to sending out the request for proposals, a year ago we hired Rod Carter from Farm Credit to give us a business plan. It took several months to plan it. He finally did it, and what he produced we weren't too happy with, but what he came out with is we could not beat the DWR in the rates that we would have to charge to do the water mastering. So that pushed us in a little different direction. So we decided that we would contact some engineering groups and send out some requests for proposals and see what we come up with. So GEI, headed up by Bill Bennett out of Sacramento, responded, and also Vestra, local group, headed up by Wendy Johnson locally. The GEI group is made up of retired water masters, very capable of doing the job, and they are doing the water mastering for the Shasta and Siskiyou, or Shasta, Scott Rivers, I'm sorry, Siskiyou County. This is their first year. When we selected Vestra, we had many reasons why we decided to go with Wendy. She's a local company, a little bit less expensive. She brought some very good ideas to our board in order to try to create a transparency so that we could be responsible to ourselves and to our water users. Newsletters is one of the big things we think is going to be very influential in trying to get information out. We have not had access to that in the past. We knew what happened after it happened. And so now we would like to alert our water users to different things, changes in personnel, changes in rates, changes in anything that might happen. We want to be as close to our users as we possibly can because we are, as directors, we're users also. She came with a line of credit that we can use, and I'll come back to that a little bit later because it's in a kind of a confusing type issue. And all this is contingent to whether we are sanctioned by the court to go forward. Now here's where the if part comes in. Our schedule, if you'll jump down kind of into the lower part or the middle part of the beginning, submit grant proposal request. We have done that at this point in time. And if it is approved, then we can engage Peter Keel, our water rights lawyer, to put us into the court system. Now, Peter Keel is the one that has handled the Scott Shasta rivers and I think also the Susan River. He has been real close to Farm Bureau, and I've had lots of communications with him. Each time I contact him, he says, I'd really like to be under retainer, but this is what I'll tell you I can do. And so he's been very, very helpful without us spending any money because we have no money. So if we can get the grant approved, then that will spur that forward, and then we will get down into the award as far as when we can start. Now, I'd like to go over something that's kind of confusing at this point in time. Our water irrigation year starts April 1st and goes till October 20th approximately. That spans 2 fiscal years, so that the first tax installment in December pays the latter part of the irrigation year. The next installment in April pays the first part of the next year. So in our budgeting situation, trying to figure out how much money we need, it's hard to know where we're going to start this program, to know what might be left in the DWR's coffers. They have made it clear that they will return any money that they don't use to us. So we think the earlier we can get started, the better it will be to try to retain what few funds might be remaining. All else fails, we can start with the April installment, then we can exercise Vestra's line of credit. We have made some bank inquiries as far as lines of credit to try to keep us online with as much money as we think we might need. If we can get all this to fall into place, then approximately April we will start the water mastering. There's a lot of ground to cover between then and now. As we're trying to go forward, we have the water user support. Now, as of last year, the Department of Water Resources, and I should say the state did actually, they pulled back their half of the fee that helped us get our water master service. They supposedly paid half, we paid half. Once that happened, then we got a lot more support from our water users because their fees went up. So at this point in time, we were spearheaded by more support from our water users. The DWR has attended several of our meetings, and they have made it clear that they feel we can do this cheaper than them, for the simple reason that they have a certain level they have to pay their people, and they're year-round people. We think we can start at a little bit lower pay scale and maybe not full-time year-round. They have also pointed out that they will help us in the transition. The attitude that I mentioned before is different now. They've been very helpful. Budgets have been easy to retrieve if you know how to run the computers. I don't, but we've been able to get them and read them. We'd like to try to keep our assessments about the same for 3 years. In the future, we'd like to lower the assessments if possible. We have to build some sort of a fund for the things we don't know are going to happen, maybe some legal fees, shortcomings in the budget. We're trying to build that up. So that's kind of our goal, is our long range. And I already mentioned that DWR withdrew their support, and so now we are shouldering the full rate. This year, their estimate, which has to be in August, actually they submitted a previous, and it was lowered by 8 or 9%. This confused us a little bit for the simple reason it's never gone down before. And so then the excuses was that they have a little bit less to do, and because of the privatization, Shasta, Scott Rivers, and also the Lassen counties. And then the flood program furnishing additional funds. This is also confusing with the state being so short of money. Why would they put money into this if we're trying to privatize, making their service area smaller yet? But so we don't feel that this is going to remain. It's probably going to be a one-year thing. So next year, the fees will also go back up again. There's been no overtime approved by the state. And looking back at the budgets, there's been quite a horrendous amount of overtime in the last 4 or 5 years. And this last year, there was no overtime paid, but the job still got done. Another question on our part, well, if the job can get done without overtime, why was there so much overtime charged? Just questions that we have. On August 20th, then the last installment, or I should say the last estimate for the budget will be submitted. And looking at this year, it's a very long water year and a very short supply. So the water master is going to have a lot of work to do this year, because probably from, I would say, in the next 2 or 3 weeks, there's going to be a lot of cutbacks, and so the water master is going to have to do a lot of top to bottom decree adjusting. As we go forward, we would like to be designated as a teeter district, because then that will give us more of an idea that we have the money to work with until all of the money is brought into the coffers. We may have to apply for some dry period funding to get us through once we are established by the court. And if we can get a grant set up, that will give us the initial legal fees and set up, because we're going to have to hire a part-time person to do our managing. We're hoping that maybe this manager, we won't need an office. We're not quite sure how much we're going to need. We're hoping to get by without an office. It's going to be part-time, hopefully computer working, and then a telephone. So we're still looking at that. We have petitioned our users, and they have signed up. I pre-mentioned this already. We've got plenty of people to do that. The court will have to give direction as far as the division of the funds. We're looking at 5/12 to the DDR, 7/12 to our district as the installments come in. And that's assuming that we are started by December 1st. We have addressed the risks, and we're sure there's probably quite a few. The court could deny the petition, which will null and void everything that we've done. We're hoping that doesn't happen. We could fall under this unfulfillment of duties. We don't think that can happen because we, directors, are users. We are responsible for our users. We're going to strive to the best of our ability to make this thing work. Consultant defaults, we've got all the faith in the world of Wendy. We think she can do this. She's pretty stern, and that's what we need. And so I think that's going to work. Funding, we're trying to exercise all the ability for funding that we can possibly do to keep us going. In the mitigations, we think working with Wendy and covering all the bases we possibly can, newsletters. One of the things I'd like to mention too, Pat Minturn mentioned this too, the decrees are set in stone. It's written in the decree as where you can divert your water, how long you can divert it, how much you can divert, and when you have to quit diverting. One more thing that's been added to that in this last year is there's weirs or measuring devices placed on all diversions, so that if there's any discrepancies, and then you go out, you measure the water, you're either working within your decree or you're working on the outside of the decree. So there shouldn't be that many problems, and if there is, then all it takes is a measurement, and you'll know exactly. Beyond that, we've got our environmental issues that we have to face, and Siskiyou County is facing those right now, a few of them. It will be something we can't foresee, but it's in the future, so we just have to look at it. Working with our consultant on our budget issues, I think that is one of the main things. We've got to work together. There again, transparency. We work together. We're responsible to our users, and I think this will all turn out fine in the end. Water users have been wanting to be updated all the time. We're doing the best we can. We're short of funds. We do a lot of this under email, try to explain to them where we are, what we're doing. And there again, we're trying to keep us as transparent as we possibly can. The experience in Siskiyou, Modoc, and Susanville have been positive. There's been some glitches along the way. They're working their way through it, but it's still working. We feel that we are ready to do this. We have tried to uncover all of the problems we think that we may address. And there again, working with Wendy, I think, is going to be our biggest attribute for this. And so the request for the grant, we're trying to receive $45,000 if we can. We want to remind the group that this will create some jobs for local people. And also it affects 236 landowners that are water users, some of which are very large tax-paying citizens. And so it does affect way more than just a handful of people. So that's my presentation. That's my request. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Wooten. Are there any questions at this time? No questions at this time, Mr. Wooten. Thank you. I do have one advance request to speak, so if this board doesn't have any questions, I think I'll go ahead and start with Mr. Bob Pierce.
Good morning. I'm Bob Pierce from Hat Creek, and I'm pleased to see that the Board of Supervisors is taking an interest in the attempt to privatize water master service. I don't feel it is in anyone's best interest. 3 minutes is not enough to elaborate on a half decade of observation, so let me start with my summary. Replacing DWR is problematic. There is, however, a value for this committee. The group should be community advocates and problem solvers. They need to increase the communication, negotiations, arbitrations, and education. Rather than offer them money, please try to focus their efforts. If we have extra money in the county, let's see that we give it to the schools, law enforcement, and fire. They are a lot more deserving, and they reach a lot more people. This started with the California Farm Bureau 5 years plus ago, and they promised legal support. When this group was ready to go to the judge, the lawyer questioned their going to the judge and what happened to the Farm Bureau's legal support. It disappeared. To corroborate their decision to proceed, this group hired a professional business planner. After research, the firm recommended dealing with DWR. That's what they weren't very happy about. He had to threaten them before he was paid, because the people that would gain the most out of these modifications would not front the money for even $30-some hundred for the business plan. It's not really a fair plan because only 7% of the water users in Hat Creek is a voting majority. The DWR must follow California Water Code in developing fees. The independent districts don't have to follow that. So therefore, they can put more of the burden on the smaller users. The DWR costs and the private costs worked out to be virtually the same. There was little or no difference. You'll see that the managerial costs were not put in the budget. And there was also the problems with legal problems. When Lassen, Siskiyou, and Modoc districts went private, they were all encumbered with lawsuits, something that I don't want to happen in Shasta County. When there was a joint meeting between Lassen County, the Susanville people, and Shasta County people, the people from Shasta asked if they could share their water master. And the people from Susanville asked if we could share a retainer for law, for a lawyer. It doesn't seem to be a win-win situation. Basically, I don't feel it's a good idea, and we really need to think twice before putting the small water users in harm's way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. That's the only request I have to speak at this time. So I will bring it back to the board.
No action.
Mr. Minturn, any final comments? Any questions of Mr. Minturn?
I've got one question.
Mr. Hawes?
If this money was granted, where would it come from? I can ask Mr. Lees that, I guess, or Connie Ragnell.
Well, certainly this would come out of a discretionary fund, so it would be general fund, which is public safety. So it would it would come from public safety.
Would there, my other question then, would there be a way of setting it up as a loan and then let it be paid out of what the revenue that they collect from the users? Anyone ever looked at that avenue?
Pat Minter, Public Works Director. Certainly, the Water Master District mentioned that they had discussed loans with various entities. They talked to the auditor, they talked to their potential engineer. The problem with that would be that the district would basically be originated with a debt, and that would, they would really be in a weaker position there. If any litigation ensued or like that, they would be just that much weaker. So there was, and perhaps they could, perhaps Mr. Wooten could also address that issue, but the problem of trying to repay a debt could be problematic over a period of years.
What happened in the other counties that are doing this? How did they obtain their funding? Does anyone know that answer?
I'm not aware. Perhaps, Mr. Wooten, are you talk to that issue?
The users in Siskiyou County went before their Board of Supervisors and were granted a $25,000 grant to get started. That's how they got
How
started,
long ago was that?
just last year.
Last year.
I see county council has a thing, and I think it might be answering the question I had, because you said there's not an action item yet. Under the agenda, it does say consider providing direction to staff, but I'm not sure I see that in the report. So, Mr. Cruz?
Yes, on that one particular question, it does provide, on the agenda, it's agendized as considering providing direction to staff as appropriate. I also just want to remind the board that right now it's agendized for the board acting as the water agency, which is a separate entity from the county. So any action right now would be as the water agency. If you wanted some sort of action that was related to acting as the county board of supervisors, that would have to be agendized on a separate date.
So I guess I'm looking to see if the board wants to do anything further with this as the water agency, to refer it back to the board, or not.
Well, since there was so much time, I mean, they've been at this for a couple of years, I believe. Haven't they, Mr. Lee? We helped get this committee, I mean, in the original, when it first started, we kind of helped get them going. I think we ought to give it the due diligence, at least send it to the board and take a closer look and look for some avenues for funding. As they all heard, and everyone else in this room heard this morning, public safety's kind of got us. It's got us all. I mean, we do not have enough money to even begin to take care of the problems we have in that respect. And then this comes along, and it really, really makes it a difficult decision. So maybe we need a little bit more time to think about it.
For Mr. Wiedemeyer, perhaps, or Mr. Minturn, is this something that would have some possibility under our IRWM plan to apply for monies through that process? I mean, it's still in the planning process, but would there be grant possibilities from Prop 84 or one of those?
You'd be applying for a grant from the state to sever the state's role as the water master.
True, but the part of the plan does call for not only for bigger water agencies, but also for disadvantaged groups that need help. So I don't know if that would be something that would, again, that it's only a plan, only planning a plan today. So it may be the funding may be too far down the road. But
Yeah, Eric knows more about that than I do.
Eric Wiedemeyer, Supervising Engineer with the Shasta County Water Agency. I think that it would be, they could do a grant application for that. I'm not sure it would score well, but it's an avenue that is available.
and aren't we still quite a ways away from actually getting any grants? We're still in the
Yeah, we're still a ways away, but we are right now. If you have a project, we do need it listed in the program. Actually, Hat and Burning Creek are actually in the upper pit, in the upper pit IRWM. So they would need to get it listed in that document.
Okay, thank you.
So we could facilitate that in the, for the Cow Creek, we could adjudicate, we could get the Cow Creek adjudication as a potential funding grant in the IRWM
problem I think may be is you're looking for some immediate action and getting going on this thing, Ms. Wooten, as you talked about. And I think, I'm not sure how far away you are before they're actually going to be getting grants through that process. Do you know, Mr. Wiedemeyer?
What I know is that the second round of Proposition 84 implementation funding is, they just released the draft document. And I don't know, I haven't looked at it, so I don't know what the schedule is to actually.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Baum?
Thank you, Chair Moody. I know we're not going to be able to answer these questions today. At the most, I'd be willing to refer it back to Water Agency staff for their recommendations.
Thank you. Mr. Hawes?
I'll go along with that, and I was going to mention a possible loan from the water agency to get this started up. So there's several ways we can look at this. So I think we do need to have some more time and study it further. Mr. Lees, you have something, I'm sure you have something to say, I can tell it.
Do we need any action on that, Mr. Cruz, or can we just, there's been sort of two people sort of suggested the board.
Yeah,
water
I would
agency look
suggest
at.
that if the board wants to provide direction to staff, it could be done perhaps by a motion as to what the direction is with a second, and then appropriate board action as to what would you like the department to bring back, and either whether you'd want it brought back to the water agency or to the Board of Supervisors acting on behalf of the county.
I would be willing to put it into a form of motion. My motion would be for the Water Agency staff to provide additional information.
I'll second the motion.
And that bring it back to the water,
back to the Water
agency board. Okay. Been moved and seconded. Any other discussion on that motion? Seeing none?
I have a question then. So as part of your inquiry, Mr. Minturn, let's find out what the role of Tehama County is relative to providing grants for this undertaking.
Yeah, grants or perhaps advancing some money as well, whatever it is. Okay, any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Wooten. The Shasta County Water Agency will recess and reconvene as the Shasta County Board of Supervisors. We move on with R3, which will receive legislative update and reports from the board members. Mr. Lees.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Supervisor Hawes?
Nothing to report today.
Supervisor Hartman?
I'll pass, thank you.
Supervisor Baugh?
I just want to thank the sheriff and the DA's office, Mr. Lowry, for making information available to public in the series of meetings regarding medical marijuana. Would note that there's another one scheduled at the fire hall on Thursday evening this week. I believe it's at 6 p.m.
Supervisor Kehoe?
On behalf of the board, I attended the addicted offender graduation ceremony. There were 4 graduates. Most impressive ceremony, and many in the audience and those making presentations congratulated these folks for such a significant accomplishment. Concludes my report.
It's nice to hear something positive that way. Very, very refreshing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kehoe. And I'll report that on July 13th, I attended the Sarasaq Valley EMS board meeting and have the information here for those who would like to review it up on the credenza and continue to move forward in that area. Then we'll move on to our scheduled hearings. A court challenge to action taken by the Board of Supervisors on any project or decision may be limited to only those issues raised during the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the Board of Supervisors during or prior to the scheduled public hearing. First one is Public Works, and it's a Permanent Road Division's annual parcel charge reports.
Morning, Chair Modi, members of the board, Scott Wall, Deputy Public Works Director. This is the time of year when we bring our annual parcel charge reports for various permanent road divisions throughout the county. Our permanent road divisions are mostly private roads where the folks along the road or developer that built the road has asked the county to maintain the road, and a parcel charge was established for the maintenance of the road. In some cases, a community group has gotten together along a road and asked that a permanent road division be formed, and have gone through the process to improve the road. And we've given a loan out through the Air Pollution Mitigation Fund. So there's a debt component to it and a maintenance component. And there are a few of them that were county roads that were originally gravel or dirt. And the people on the road asked if we could pave the road, and we said, if you will buy the asphalt, we will pave the road for you and continue to maintain it. And so there's a few of those where the people pay back for the asphalt that was purchased for the road. The charges are the same as last year, except were indicated in the report. There are a few that have increased. That's a significant probably change. In the last few years, we've added a component to the new PRDs, which allow us to inflate the costs or the parcel charges every year through an inflationary factor, which is in the Engineering News Record. It's a national magazine, and they keep track of various construction costs. It's the same kind of an index that's used to inflate developer impact fees, for instance. So we have adjusted some of these PRDs for that inflationary rate, and the others are pretty much the same as they've always been. There's a public hearing associated with this. It's been noticed, and you're asked to take any public testimony, and then the actions in the report are to confirm the annual parcel charges in the resolution and have them placed in the tax bills for fiscal year 12-13. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing. Anyone wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the hearing. Pleasure of the board.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, R5, County Service Areas Annual Parcel Charge Reports.
Morning, Chair Modi, members of the board. Scott Wall, Deputy Public Works Director. This is another annual thing that we bring before the board. It's our county service areas annual parcel charge reports. These county service areas are related to water, storm drain, and street lighting. In some cases, fees are collected for the payment of debt service that the CSA has accumulated. In other cases, it's the actual operating funds that the CSA uses, for instance, for street lighting and storm drain. And these fees are the same as last year. We bring them for you once a year, and you're asked to hold a public hearing, take any testimony, and then take the actions recommended in the staff report.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing. We wish to speak on this item. Seeing none, hearing is closed.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Haas, second by Supervisor Hartman. Any other questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item are 6, County Service Areas Delinquent Fees and Uncollectible Debts.
Morning again, Chair Modi, members of the board. Scott Wall, Deputy Public Works Director. Another item we bring annually are our county service area delinquent fees and uncollectible debts. The county service areas provide various sewer and water services out in the unincorporated area, and we are a business, just like many businesses. We have delinquencies that people don't pay their sewer bills or their water bills. We are allowed once a year to come before you with the delinquent fees and ask that these fees accumulated in the past year be placed on the property tax bills and are collected that way. That is a great way for us to collect funds that are delinquent. Notices are sent to each person on the list for the delinquent fees, telling them that they have a delinquent amount and that this item will be before the board today, and a public hearing has been scheduled. The uncollectible fees are similar to delinquent fees, but they are fees that a property owner or a tenant accumulated, and then the property was sold to someone else. What's happened lately is we had a lot of properties go through foreclosure, and so banks are taking them over. But we send these uncollectible fees or these still delinquent fees off to our collection agency, which is the courts. The courts does our collections for us. They usually spend up to a year trying to collect on these fees, and then they return the ones back to us that cannot be collected. And we bring them to you every year and ask that these be discharged as or called uncollectible. What I have attached to the staff report, there's a pretty long, big list here of the last 14 years of data for each CSA. And then I've asked a handout, which you received, is a more detailed explanation of the uncollectible debts. I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail. Every year we have delinquent fees in all of our CSA and our water and sewer districts. The one that stands out the most to me is Cottonwood. It seems to be continuing to increase. I know the Cottonwood area has been hit with a lot of foreclosures, and there's still foreclosures going on down there. That went down a little bit last year, but it's increased at least 10% this year. We're up to $61,000 in delinquent fees, which totals about 12% of our annual revenues for that CSA. That's getting substantial. But the good thing is we're allowed to collect it. If we can put on the tax rolls, we're going to collect all that money. The other ones are nothing too much stands out. Some of them have gone down, some of them have gone up. Craigview's gone up about double, but it's still a small amount when you consider the overall revenues for Craigview. For instance, that's 1.25% of their revenues. After Cottonwood, the second one is Costella, which is about 3.5%, and then followed by French Gulch, which is a little bit under 3%, 2.9%, and then Keswick and Jones Valley are about 2.5% of the delinquent fees, and then the other ones are less than 1%. So, and moving on to the uncollectible fees, every CSA looks pretty good, except for Cottonwood. In fact, you look at Craigview, we haven't had an uncollectible fee in the last 13 plus years, so it's the first time we had an uncollectible fee that we've been keeping track of. $109, that was one person or one entity. Cottonwood, over $4,000 to be discharged, which is pretty much the most we've had. We almost got up to $3,800 back in 0304. That's about an eighth of a tenth of a percent, or 1/8 of a percent, excuse me, of revenues. Again, if you break this down further and you look at attached, there's listing of all the people that are both delinquent and uncollectible. What I see in Cottonwood as the delinquent fees are mostly just people. I don't see many banks. I'm surprised that there weren't some more banks that were listed in here, but these are mostly all individuals, seem to be to me. But if you go to the uncollectibles, that's where it changes completely. And you see the uncollectibles, it's about 80% of the uncollectibles are banks, lending institutions, foreclosing agents of some sort. And if you look at the other remaining CSAs, Sugarloaf, foreclosure, lending agency, Jones Valley, almost all of that were foreclosures, lending agencies. Craigview was all a lending agency, and Keswick was a person that passed away and then their property was foreclosed on. So what's happening is the banks are taking over the properties and they're not paying their bills. And then we refer them collections, and there's really no way to collect from these banks. They aren't responding to anything. We aren't collecting from the banks. So it's just one of those things that is happening right now. I'm hopeful that maybe we're seeing a peak here and things will turn around. I know there are still foreclosures going on, and they're going to continue to go on, and hopefully the economy will turn around here at some point. But this is just a symptom of what's going on in the economy, as you talked earlier today about. And so continuing on, we have until, if anybody wants to pay their delinquent fees, we have until September 10th, Monday. The auditors cut us off at 5 o'clock on Monday, September 10th, to make any corrections to delinquent rolls before they go to the tax rolls. And then finally, we have, I have one person that called up in Cottonwood who was a property owner, had a tenant that had a delinquent bill, and he's responsible for it. He said he was going to pay the bill, no problem, but he just asked that maybe we should place all the bills on the property taxes every year and not have to do this. And so I thought about that a little bit, and I'll look at that a little bit more and see if that's a possibility and what kind of ramifications we'd have with that. But it may be a way that we could collect all the fees every year in Cottonwood and not have an uncollectible if it's always placed on the property tax bill. That concludes my presentation at this time, unless you have any questions.
Supervisor Kehoe.
Thank you, Mr. Wall. Let me yet again ask the question that we've asked for the last 5 or 6 years, and that is, when we look at the delinquent fees and uncollectibles with a total of $71,306, and then you look at that in juxtaposition with the Cottonwood CSA 17, it's $61,385. So the question is, what can we do about that? We seem to be in an accepting mode. And there's nothing that we can do to reduce these numbers?
Not that I know of right now.
Okay.
The option of putting them all on the property tax bill every year would reduce it. Obviously, there wouldn't be a delinquency then, it would be collected on the property tax bill.
These are delinquents that, for the most part, pay and pay a penalty.
Yes. There's been discussion in the past that some people think that they can deduct these delinquent fees on their property taxes if they're on the property tax bill. And so they let them go to the property tax bill, and then when they do their taxes, they think they can deduct this as a property expense, which I don't believe that's the right way to do it, but nor do I think that's legal. But I think that may be in some people's minds. It's been continuing. We've had fluctuations in it, but as we know, the economy's not very good right now, so this is a reflection of the economy too.
No, I understand that.
We're going to have some regardless every year. We've had, in the 20,000, which is not bad. We raise about $500,000 a year in that CSA. That's our biggest CSA.
When we look at the data that you presented to us, it appears that we really don't have an across-the-board problem. We have a problem with CSA 17.
Yes.
Perhaps to Mr. Keyhill's question, do you know, is it typically the same group of people each year who's delinquent, or is it
That's an interesting question. I never did go back to check and see,
Because
who's
I
been
find
delinquent.
that, to your point, Mr.
But-
Keel, if it is the same group of people for the most
I-
part who are, maybe that's the people we need to address.
I
But
think-
but if it is just,
I can certainly go back and put a spreadsheet together that starts listing all the people on it and see how the names keep popping up year after year.
Supervisor Hawes?
Well, I just thought that maybe placing it on the property tax bill might be a good idea. And what about all of these now that we're gonna just write off? Are we gonna keep those as liens on the property, or are we just gonna walk away from them?
Now, the uncollectibles are wiped out.
I don't understand why we just can't put that as a lien on the property, and then if somebody buys the property,
Well,
they'll have to pay
what
it.
happens is you can't lien a property if the person that bought the property didn't have, anything to do with
Their
the
bill.
previous debt. So,
Well, it gets me to excuse these banks this way. That bothers me.
Supervisor Baugh?
Thank you, Chair Modi. As I mentioned in past meetings, I think there is a perception in the South County that we can delay payment by simply not paying and then have it, even with penalty, paid through the property tax. In the city of Anderson, we pay ours on our property tax bill. I would recommend that we seriously consider that. You've heard several supervisors echo that thought. I think it's time to simply do that. It would eliminate the ability to play this game.
all right, we will look into that.
Any other questions of staff? Then I'm going to open the public hearing. You may wish to address this item. Seeing none, hearing's closed. Pleasure of the board.
I move approval of the staff recommendation.
Second.
And inclusive in that motion is Supervisor Baugh's recommendation that we investigate.
Very good. Thank you.
I'll agree with that on the second.
Okay, so there's been consensus on that as well. So moved in second. Any other discussion? Mr. Cruz, was that, no, was it okay?
Yes.
Okay, I just saw that look in your eyes. I thought, uh-oh. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We are going to move on to our closed session announcement, but for those who might jump up and leave because of the closed session, I will remind you that we are going to recess after our closed session and then continue our meeting to the afternoon at 1:30, where we receive a report on a workshop. Actually, we'll be doing a workshop on water issues. So closed session announcements, we will recess closed session for approximately 30 minutes with a conference with legal counsel on existing litigation with Revere, John Selmo, and Seven Hills Land and Cattle Company, and also liability claims with Jesse Wells in the county of Shasta. Supervisor Hawes?
Yes, I'll be recusing from the Anselmo matters due to the conflict of interest under Government Code Section 87100. Thank you.
Thank you. At the conclusion of closed session, reportable action, if any, will be reported in open session. We are recessed.